Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Literary Lore. Today we'll be covering one of the strangest love poems I have ever read. Now, before I go any further with this one, I have to warn you, it involves fleas doing what fleas do. I mean, if I tell you anymore, it's going to spoil the surprise. John Donne's The Flea is regarded as legitimate literature. John Donne in general, like very famous writer. Now, I remember enduring this poem when I was a senior in high school preparing for the AP exam. So as usual, the link to the poem will be in the description, but let's talk a bit about Mr. Donne. John Donne, born in the early 1570s, grew up Catholic in England. At the time, being Catholic in England was actually illegal, and this had a variety of effects on his life, one of which was being unable to graduate because he was required to recognize the monarchy as the head of the church. Later, he was temporarily imprisoned for marrying Anne More without her father's consent, because that was another thing they really frowned upon back then. But he was eventually freed, and of his 12 children, 5 didn't make it past 10. And his wife died shortly after the 12th. So during this time, he became a minister and a chaplain, and he spent a large portion of his life writing compelling sermons and poetry and was greatly respected. He was known for his masterful use of conceit. Conceit is the use of an extended metaphor to make a greater point. So we'll be seeing conceit as we analyze today's poem. Before we start, again, this is a weird one on the first run. Hopefully it will make a bit more sense by the end. But we don't know exactly when he wrote this piece. It's likely to have been early in his life when courting his eventual wife. The poem is 3 9-line stanzas, but I'll be splitting them up for digestibility. I highly suggest experiencing it yourself first. Anyway, let's roll. Mark but this flea, and mark in this, how little that which thou deniest me is. It sucked me first, and now sucks thee, and in this flea our 2 bloods mingled be. Okay, we're taking it slow. Let's translate these old-timey looking words. The word mark means to look at. Like, a marksman is a sniper that can spot things from far away. Thou means you. Thee also means you. I could do a video explaining that later if anyone cares, but the most important translation tip I have is to just slap any word with est at the end of it. So deniest becomes deny. It's a bit easier to process, so let's read that first bit again. Look at this flea and see how little it is you deny me. It sucked me first and now sucks you, and in this flea our 2 bloods mix. Told you it's a weird one. The flea imagery was surprisingly prevalent in this era, apparently, but essentially his prospective lover is depriving him of something, and this parasite has consumed their blood and mixed them together. Now, ancient beliefs at the time suggested that sex would result in the respective liquids of the couple mixing to create new life. So basically, the flea, as we will see, is meant to be a metaphor for their union, a conceit that we'll see throughout the poem, this metaphor of the flea. Thou know'st that this cannot be said, a sin, no shame, no loss of maidenhead. Yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered swells with 1 blood made of 2. And this, alas, is more than we would do. Okay. Another good chunk to translate here. Maidenhead is just a fancy way to say virginity, so now we know what it is the speaker is after. Woo is essentially another way to say flirting, or in more contemporary terms, rizzing. The flea swelling with blood would have been interpreted as a particularly crude joke at the time. So with that all understood, we can see that he's essentially trying to convince her that being with him would not be a sin or source of shame. During this time, to have sex outside of marriage would have been an extremely scandalous action. I mean, people could be arrested for being Catholic, so yeah, these guys did not have the separation of church and state. Oh, stay, 3 lives and 1 flea spare, where we almost, nay more, than married are. This flea is you, and I, and this our marriage bed and marriage temple is. Okay, so the speaker asks her to wait a moment. That's essentially what stay means. Even in the modern day, a person staying in place is basically waiting. But what we get is a biblical allusion here to the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, being replaced with the speaker, his love, and the flea. Amping up the sanctity, he states that through this parasite, they are more than married. Their marriage bed, where they're consummating their marriage, is a temple. The flea is the consummation of this metaphysical blood marriage. Though parents grudge and you, we are met, encloistered in these living walls of jet. Though use make you apt to kill me, let not to that self-murder added be, and sacrilege 3 sins in killing 3. Another poetry tip: if you see a weird word that looks like 2 conjoined words, like can and not into can't, there's a good chance that it's exactly what is happening here. So where is actually we are. The words were modified to preserve the rhythm of the line. I'll translate this one out so that you can see what people find particularly upsetting about this piece. Even though your parents disapprove, and you as well, we're joined in this flea, safe in these black walls. Not only do you want to kill me, but yourself as well. It would be a sin to kill the 3 of us in the flea. Many analyses tend to skip the "and you" part. I remember being in class with my teacher, who was a woman, that described this poem as romantic. Maybe I wasn't picking up on her irony at the time, but reading the poem in this decade, it comes across a lot creepier. He essentially tells her it doesn't matter if she doesn't want to be with him. It's happening either way. A counterpoint to that is that if he's writing this to his future wife and they're already in some semblance of relationship, it could be seen as him using the poem to protect or validate her chastity, saying she doesn't want his advances, even if she actually really does. But it's hard to read it that way outside of that context. Cruel and sudden hast thou since purpled thy nail in blood of innocence. Wherein could this flea guilty be, except in that drop which it sucked from thee? She squashed the flea. She killed it. Their marriage is no more, and an innocent arthropod is dead. I love this melodramatic line stating that the only drop of guilt in that little bug comes from her because she's a murderer. Yet thou triumphst and say'st that thou find'st not thyself nor me in the weaker now. 'Tis true they learn how false fears be, just so much honor when thou yield'st to me will waste as this flea's death took life from thee. So despite the drama of the flea's death, it's revealed, surprisingly, that this creature's demise has had no effect on them. He takes this fact and he says, it's pointless to fear. When you give in, your focus on maintaining your virginity will have been a waste, just like this flea's death. Again, this sentiment at the time may have been genuinely romantic, but in modern times it feels closer to misogynistic and uncomfortably forceful. I think of a more eloquent Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. It isn't a question of if she will be with him, but rather when she'll finally be worn down and stop saying no. I find this poem fascinating for its historical reputation and that this was written by a man that would become a prominent religious figure of his time. This poem was never intended for the public. It was only released after his death. It's very possible the poem is filled with things that were hyper-specific to his intended recipient, and there is no way to know. Either way, if you're planning on writing a poem this month for Valentine's Day, and you want to be a bit of a creep about it, you could always write about a mosquito and get similar results. Thank you guys for watching, and feel free to share this madness with a friend for Valentine's Day. I'll be back next week with something focused on self-love. Until next time, carpe diem.